In the year 2006, the United States government came after one of the best restaurants in the world. Not for its taxes, not for its money, not for anything you would expect. They came for a bean. A small, wrinkled, black bean that smells like vanilla, almond, and warm honey all at once. A bean that costs more by weight than most people spend on dinner. A bean that the finest chefs on earth quietly adore. And a bean that has been illegal to sell as food in America since before your grandparents were born. This is the story of the Tonka bean. How a seed from the Amazon rainforest became the darling of European perfume, the secret weapon of counterfeiters, and finally, an outlaw, banned by the same country whose finest kitchens could not stop craving it. A flavor, they decided, that was simply too good and too dangerous to be allowed. Let us start at the scene of the crime. In the year 2005, a chef named Grant Achatz opened a restaurant in Chicago called Alinea. Within a few years, it would be spoken of as one of the best restaurants on the planet, eventually holding 3 Michelin stars, the highest rating that exists. Achatz was not just a cook, he was an artist who treated a plate the way a composer treats silence and sound. And he had a favorite secret. In an interview, he mentioned it out loud. A rare bean from South America, shaved in the thinnest possible whisper over a dessert that filled the whole mouth with vanilla and almond and something darker underneath. The Tonka bean. He did not know he had just confessed to a crime. Because not long after, the Food and Drug Administration took notice and came knocking. The Tonka bean, it turned out, had been forbidden in American food since the year 1954. A restaurant celebrated all over the world had been quietly breaking federal law, one paper-thin shaving at a time. Now hold that image, a federal agency versus a dessert, because it is the whole mystery of this story in a single scene. How does a bean end up with a target on its back? How does a flavor become a crime? To understand it, we cannot start in Chicago. We have to start in the rainforest, with the people who were the very first to bend down and pick this seed up off the ground. Deep in the lowland rainforests of northern South America, across what is now Venezuela, Brazil, Guyana, Suriname, and Colombia, grows a giant. A tree that can rise nearly 100 feet into the canopy. Botanists call it Dipteryx odorata. The name means, roughly, 2 wings, and fragrant. 2 wings for the shape of its pod, fragrant for the reason this whole story exists. But the people who actually live beside the tree have older names for it. In Brazil, they call it coumarin. In Venezuela, they call it sarapia. And this is where our ledger opens, with its first and most overlooked entry, the gatherer. The finest Tonka beans in the world do not come from a plantation. They grow wild. In the great river basins of the Orinoco and the Amazon, the Tonka tree scatters its hard fruit across the forest floor, and once a year, families walk out into the deep forest to collect them by hand. Many of these communities, indigenous and mixed heritage alike, live a half-nomadic life built around the forest itself. They fish, they hunt, they farm a little, and for one season a year, they gather sarapia. The beans are picked up off the ground one at a time, cracked from their pods, laid out to dry, and packed into rough jute sacks, weighing about 40 pounds each, ready for the long journey to the perfume houses and kitchens of the rich world. By some estimates, Tens of thousands of people across dozens of villages depend on that one season of gathering to earn their year. And here is the quiet, bitter arithmetic of the ledger. The person who walks miles into the forest and bends down 1,000 times to fill a sack earns a tiny fraction of what that same sack will be worth once it reaches Paris or New York. The forest supplies the treasure. Others, far away, decide what it is worth. There is one strange mercy in this story, though. Because the Tonka tree is worth money while it is standing, it gives people a reason to keep the forest alive rather than cut it down. A live tree that drops beans every year is worth more than the timber of a dead one. So the very greed that would later put this bean on trial is also, in its own crooked way, helping to protect a piece of the Amazon. Remember the gatherer. They are the only person in this whole story who ever truly needed the bean. Everyone we meet from here on wanted something else from it. Now, the bean leaves the forest. It is the early 1800s. The Tonka bean has crossed the ocean into Europe, a curiosity from the New World. Prized for a scent no one could quite name. Hay, vanilla, almond, tobacco, all folded into one. And in the year 1820, a German pharmacist named August Vogel did something that would change the bean forever. He reached inside it and pulled out its soul. Vogel isolated the single compound responsible for that intoxicating smell, a crystalline substance he drew straight from the dried seed. We now call it coumarin, and the name is a fossil of the bean's own history. It comes directly from kumaru, the word the forest people had used for centuries. A single Tonka bean is dense with it. Coumarin is not a flavoring the bean happens to contain, it is very nearly the whole point of the bean. Here is our second ledger entry, the chemist. And with him, the bean quietly splits in two. Because once you know the name of the ghost inside a thing, you can do far more than admire it. You can measure it, you can weigh it, you can copy it. And one day, you can put it on trial. Vogel meant no harm. He was simply curious, the way all chemists are curious. But the moment coumarin had a name, the Tonka bean stopped being a whole, mysterious seed from a faraway forest. It became a container for a single, nameable molecule. And molecules, unlike rare rainforest beans, can be built from scratch. The next entry in the ledger belongs to a man who never needed to touch a single bean. In the year 1868, an English chemist named William Henry Perkin managed to build coumarin from scratch in a laboratory, out of coal tar, the black, oily waste of the gasworks. Stop and feel the size of that moment. The scent that had once demanded a rare tree, an entire rainforest, and the labor of distant gatherers, could now be conjured in a factory by the barrel out of garbage for pennies. Coumarin was one of the very first fragrance molecules ever made by human hands. It did not just give perfumers a new note, it rewrote the economics of smell itself. Before this, a beautiful scent was a luxury tax paid to nature. You needed real flowers, real resins, real beans, harvested and shipped at enormous cost. After this, beauty could be manufactured. And in the 1880s, a perfumer named Paul Parquet, working for the House of Houbigant, used that cheap new molecule to create a fragrance called Fougère Royale. It is remembered as one of the first truly modern perfumes, the first great scent, built around something born in a lab rather than a garden. It was so successful that it founded an entire family of fragrances, the fougere family, that still rules the world of men's cologne today. That fresh-shaved, sweet, woody barbershop smell you know so well? That is the ghost of the tonka bean, still whispering more than 100 years later. By some estimates, roughly 1 in every 3 fragrances on the market today contains coumarin in some form. Through this one molecule, the tonka bean had quietly conquered the entire world of luxury. And here is the first cruel twist of the ledger. The better chemists became at copying the scent, the less the world needed the real bean, or the real people who gathered it. The forest had handed over its secret. Now, the factory owned it, and could make it forever, without ever paying the gatherer again. So far, the tonka bean has been a hero of luxury. Now we meet the entry that turned it into a suspect, the forger. To understand this, you need one more scent in your head: vanilla. Real vanilla is one of the most expensive flavors on earth. It comes from a delicate orchid, pollinated by hand, then cured for months. To this day, it sits near the top of every list of the world's most counterfeited foods. And the tonka bean, by pure accident of chemistry, carries a scent that leans warm and sweet and vanilla-like. Coumarin, it turns out, smells a great deal like vanilla's cousin. You can already see the temptation. Why pay a fortune for real vanilla when a cheap Amazonian bean could fake the effect for a fraction of the price? And so, for decades, tonka became one of the counterfeiters' favorite weapons. It was slipped into vanilla flavorings, ice creams, and sweets that had never once touched a real vanilla pod. The bean that perfumed the necks of the rich was now also lying to ordinary people about their dessert. Even today, when food scientists hunt for vanilla fraud, coumarin is the fingerprint they look for. Real vanilla should not contain it. So when the coumarin shows up, they know exactly who has been in the room. This is the moment the bean's reputation begins to rot. It is no longer just the soul of fine perfume. In the eyes of regulators, it has become the tool of the cheat, a way to deceive people about what they are eating. And a government that will happily forgive a luxury will never forgive a fraud. The tonka bean now had enemies. Enemies who were paid to be suspicious. All they needed was one hard reason to strike. And that reason was coming, not from a kitchen, but from a frozen field full of dead cattle. To find the reason the tonka bean was outlawed, we have to leave it behind for a while and follow the trail of its most dangerous relatives. This is where the story turns cold. In the 1920s, across the northern farms of the United States and Canada, cattle began to die in a way that terrified the men who raised them. They bled. From a small cut, from a routine procedure, sometimes from nothing at all. The animals simply would not stop bleeding, and one by one they bled to death from the inside. The cause was traced to their feed, to hay made from sweet clover that had grown wet and moldy. And sweet clover, like the tonka bean, is rich in coumarin. When that hay spoiled, its harmless coumarin was transformed by mold into something monstrous, a powerful blood thinner. Farmers called it sweet clover disease. Now the story becomes almost unbelievable. It is February 1933. A blizzard is tearing across Wisconsin. A desperate farmer named Ed Carlson has just watched his cattle bleed to death, and his last living bull is bleeding from the nose. So he loads his truck with the evidence of his ruin: a dead cow, a milk can filled with her blood that will not clot, and about 100 pounds of the moldy hay he believes has cursed him. And he drives nearly 200 miles through the storm to the university in Madison, looking for someone, anyone, who can tell him why his animals are dying. It is a Saturday. Almost every office is locked. Cold, exhausted, and half-defeated, Carlson tries door after door until he finds one that opens, and stumbles into the laboratory of a biochemist named Carl Paul Link. Link listens to the frantic farmer, looks at the dead cow and the unclotting blood, and recognizes the signs of sweet clover disease at once. At first, all he can offer is useless advice. Stop feeding them the spoiled hay. Carlson leaves, beaten. But something about that visit through the blizzard lodges in Link's mind. He turns his entire laboratory toward one question: what, exactly, is hiding inside spoiled sweet clover that makes blood forget how to heal? It takes years. But by the end of the 1930s, Link and his students finally pull the killer out of the hay and give it a name: decumarol, a twisted cousin of coumarin, born when the innocent molecule rots. And then Link does something audacious. If this compound makes creatures bleed to death, he reasons, then a stronger version of it would make a perfect rat poison. In the year 1948, his lab produces exactly that. They name it after the foundation that funded their work, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, stitching its initials, WARF, onto the tail of coumarin. They call it warfarin. You may already know that name. Because warfarin, the rat poison born from moldy hay, would go on to become one of the most widely used blood-thinning medicines in human history, taken by millions of people to this very day to prevent strokes and clots. A killer of cattle, a killer of rats, and a saver of human lives. All of it, chemically, part of the coumarin family. All of it, in a sense, cousins of the beautiful bean shaved over dessert in Chicago. Now, let us be careful and fair here, because this is exactly where the Tonka bean's story is usually told badly. Pure coumarin, the compound in the Tonka bean itself, is not the blood thinner. It does not, on its own, make you bleed. It has to be spoiled, rotted, transformed by mold before it becomes that killer. The Tonka bean is not rat poison. But by now, in the mind of a regulator, the whole coumarin family had a body count, and guilt by association is a powerful thing. Because coumarin carried a second, quieter danger of its own. When scientists fed large doses of it to laboratory animals, rats and dogs, it damaged their livers. The technical word is hepatotoxicity, poison to the liver. And so we reach our fifth ledger entry, the regulator. In the year 1954, the Food and Drug Administration made its ruling. Any food containing added coumarin, whether as the pure chemical, or as Tonka beans, or as Tonka extract, was declared adulterated, unfit, forbidden. The bean that had flavored ice creams and sodas and sweets for generations was, with the stroke of a pen, made illegal. And here is the detail that history almost hides from you. That very same year, 1954, warfarin, the poison cousin, was approved for use in human beings as a medicine. Think about the madness of that. In a single year, one branch of the coumarin family was welcomed into the nation's hospitals to be swallowed on purpose by the millions. While another branch, the sweet and harmless bean, was thrown out of the nation's kitchens as a poison. Here is the part that makes chefs furious to this day. The dose that harmed those lab animals was enormous. To put a human being in real danger, you would have to eat Tonka beans by the fistful. By some estimates, dozens of whole beans at a single sitting. But a single Tonka bean is so intense that one bean can flavor food for dozens of people. No chef on earth cooks with a fistful. They use a ghost, a shaving, a breath of it. And yet the law drew no line between a poison and a whisper. A ban. The Tonka bean was now officially an outlaw. Which brings us back, at last, to that knock on the door in Chicago. And this is where the Tonka bean's strangest chapter begins. Because the ban did not kill the bean. It did something far more powerful. It turned the bean into forbidden fruit. Outside the United States, the Tonka bean never left. In France, in Canada, across much of Europe, chefs kept shaving it over chocolate and custard and cream, completely legally, and diners kept falling in love with it. But inside America, it became something else, a whispered secret, passed hand to hand between the most ambitious chefs in the country. They knew it was banned. They used it anyway. The finest restaurants in New York and Chicago quietly bought the beans, because a chef chasing perfection does not like being told that the single most beautiful flavor in the room is against the law, which is exactly how Grant Achatz ended up on the wrong side of the federal government. He spoke about the bean in public, the authorities took notice, and one of the greatest restaurants in the world got a visit over a legume. Sit with the absurd beauty of that for a second. A country that will happily sell you 1,000 things, far more likely to kill you. Sending inspectors after a dessert garnish. Our sixth and final ledger entry is the rebel. And the rebellion is not history. It is happening right now. In recent years, the Tonka bean has been quietly creeping back onto dessert menus across the United States. A pear pavlova here, a chocolate tart there, with restaurants all but daring the law to notice. Chefs, writers, and scientists now argue openly that the ban is a relic, that the science behind it is 70 years out of date, that the tiny amounts actually used in a kitchen are harmless, and that the simplest proof is the rest of the planet, which has been eating Tonka in peace, without a trail of bodies, for generations. They are, in effect, asking a very old law, a very simple question. Who exactly are you still protecting? So let us close the ledger and add it all up. A seed falls from a giant tree in the Amazon. A gatherer bends down and picks it up. A chemist steals its secret and gives it a name. A perfumer turns that name into an empire of scent. A forger uses it to lie to the world. A regulator decides it is a danger and casts it out. And a rebel, generations later, risks a federal charge just to shave it, whisper thin, over a plate of chocolate. The Tonka bean is a mirror. Every single person who touched it saw something different: medicine, money, beauty, fraud, poison, rebellion. But the bean itself never changed. We did. And that is the quiet lesson hiding inside this wrinkled little seed. We like to believe that when we ban something, or crown it, or call it precious, or call it poison, we are describing the thing itself. But most of the time, we are only describing ourselves, our fears, our appetites, and what we are willing to pay or risk to feel something wonderful. The Tonka bean smells like heaven and hides a warning. And maybe that is exactly why, after 200 years, we still cannot leave it alone. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, you are exactly the kind of curious mind this channel was built for. Subscribe to Grim Goods, and let us keep pulling the dark, strange histories out of the ordinary things all around you. And tell me in the comments, if the science really is out of date, should America finally set the Tonka bean free? I read every reply. Until next time, remember, everything has a history. Even the things they told you not to taste.